It is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Roosevelt Skerrit, Prime Minister of Dominica. Welcome, Excellency. You have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, today Dominica stands on the front line of the war on climate change. At 5 p.m. on September 17, out of the mid-Atlantic, Maria emerged as a Category 1 hurricane with winds speed of just over 100 kilometers per hour. Within 24 hours, this monster storm had moved from a Category 1 to a Category 5 hurricane with wind speeds in excess of 270 kilometers per hour. Hurricane Maria was reported to be one of the most rapidly intensifying storms in recent history. Our citizens had barely had time to prepare before the ferocious winds and incessant rain began assaulting our nature island. As night fell, we hunkered down to await its onslaught. Some of us were forced to flee our homes in the dark of night, seeking safer shelter, buffeted and battered by the heavy rains and powerful winds. When dawn broke, the scenes of utter devastation across this once lush green island were heartbreaking. In some areas where houses once stood, there lay mounds of dirt and debris. Others had their roofs blown off. Landslides scarred the landscape. Trees were uprooted or laid bare, and flood waters raged. All utilities were non-functional. Assessments conducted by the World Bank Group and other international agencies indicate that 90% of buildings have either been damaged or destroyed. Over 224% of GDP was wiped out, with major damage sustained to our agriculture, tourism, and housing sectors. Public infrastructure was severely impacted and our forests decimated. 2 months later, 95% of the country remains without electricity. Our water systems are compromised. Many citizens remain displaced and in shelters. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the reality of climate change. Within a few hours, an entire country was brought to its knees by the forces of nature. 2 years ago, we convened in a similar setting and signed on to the Paris Agreement. We pledged as an international community to take positive and proactive steps to stem the tide of climate change. The developed world, pledged funds to be made available for the mitigation and adaptation of the harmful effects of climate change. We know the potential impact of climate change and of countries that may disappear. How many of the countries that continue to pollute the planet had to suffer a loss of 224% of its GDP this year? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I present to you today that our countries remain under threat. To ensure our very existence, the world must do better. We argued at Cop21 for 1.5% to stay alive. A commitment was made for 2%. But by all assessments, we will not even achieve that goal. Ladies and gentlemen, not enough is being done to ensure that we effectively mitigate the warming of our planet. How many of our vulnerable island states have been able to access green climate funds to make us more climate resilient? What mechanism is there for us to be able to access emergency funds when facing a disaster like that caused by Hurricane Maria? We have been put on the front line by others. We were the guardians of nature. We have not contributed to global warming. 60% of Dominica is covered by protected rainforest and has been so long before climate change. Our marine environment is similarly protected. We are growing weary, waiting for the world to hear our cry. We hear that now is the time to act. We read headlines of funds set aside. We smell the sweet fragrance of agreements, promises, and commitments, but we grow weary waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the hardship we face, we have decided to raise our standard. We have publicly committed to the international community that we will rebuild ourselves as the first fully climate-resilient nation in the Anthropocene. Our small island will shine the torch for others to follow. But, Mr. President, we grow weary. The international community has an opportunity now to truly demonstrate its commitment to battling the effects of climate change. We need you to partner with us to build a truly climate-resilient nation, a nation adapted to the new reality of fiercer, more frequent, and more ferocious storms. Ladies and gentlemen, last evening's high-level event provided the platform where a selection of non-party stakeholders championed the critical message of accelerated climate action and how best to bridge the gap between non-party actors and negotiators. We call on all stakeholders to help us to rebuild better and smarter. Dominica is determined to restore our rainforests and protect our blue horizons. We have grasped the moment to be in charge and to change what we want in this world. This isn't a rash promise. It is what we are struggling to do today. But battered as we are, we stand before you today, awake and tall to the challenge. We call for your assistance, support, and partnership. We ask you not to allow climate change to be reduced to a cultural war fought from armchairs. We ask you not to allow the skeptics to sneer, saying, "I told you COP was all hot air," and that nothing real will change. I urge you today not to betray the Paris Agreement. Let us operationalize it now. Give Paris meaning now, not on paper, but here in this forum. Stand with us. Pledge today to help fund the first climate-resilient nation. Help us to rebuild our homes, schools, pipes, and hospitals in a climate-resilient way. Join us. Join us. Do not leave us alone to fight this war. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but today. Right now is the moment of truth. Will it be the unraveling of Paris or the foundation of Paris? That is the simple choice you get to make today. It is a choice that will be measured by the degree of meaningful assistance you give to those suffering damage and loss today, yet fighting and fighting on the front line. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.